Hello and welcome back to the finals of the World Championship in Through the Ages. Today we are going to take a look at the second one of the four-player game, seeing how that game will be going. And after we have taken a look at the game, we sadly need to talk about the incident of unsportsmanship that sadly has happened during the finals and the consequences that there will be on how the finals will be continued. Yeah, but about that we will talk at the end of the video. Let's first of all take a look at that four-player game between the four finalists. And yeah, first of all, we can take a quick look at the leaders and wonders. We can see that we have some lab leaders with Sid Meier, Steve Jobs, and Einstein. We have also Sid Meier and Pierre together with the internet as a potentially strong combination. We have both Chaplin and Marlene Dietrich for some theater synergy, however, there's no Hollywood. Then we have Gandhi and Manhattan Project for the military, and also Red Cross is there. We have both Ocean Liner Service and Maria Theresa in H2. We have also Harvard College and Railroad and Statue, so some potentially strong wonders. We have both Nobel and Newton for some science setup, potentially also Darwin. We have James Watt together with the Railroad. We have two military action leaders in H2. One military action leader in H1 with Jan Žižka, Nostradamus, and Barbarossa can help with the strength. We have Columbus, but there's no Suez Canal in the game. And then we have both Gutenberg and Leonardo da Vinci. Great Wall, but no Himeji Castle. Silk Road, but no Universitas. And for St. Peter's Basilica, but no Forbidden City. Alright, Wanderlust is playing in first position. The result of the game that we have seen already was of course that A440 was able to win. Kyshantry finished second, Eepogi third, and Wanderlust fourth. Wanderlust opens the game by taking the Stonehenge, which I think makes sense as it is a strong wonder and he will definitely have a leader to take at his next turn. Kyshantry is then interestingly willing to go for Moses here together with the Ridgeland. I think generally it makes sense to go for one of the leaders here together with the Ridgeland instead of, you could argue just taking Aristotle as well, but I think generally taking a leader plus the Ridgeland here should be fine. But interestingly, he values the Moses more highly here than Sun Tzu, for example. But Moses can be a perfectly fine leader. Eepogi will go for Sun Tzu plus Hanging Gardens. Hanging Gardens can also be quite strong in a military game, so there's definitely some potential that he could turn this into a military heavy game. A440 will then take Aristotle and Urban Growth, which I think is a fine pick. Could have also gone for Library and Patriotism, but Aristotle is a strong leader and Urban Growth is the better yellow card than the Patriotism, and I guess with Aristotle sometimes it can be fine to play without an HA wonder, or maybe you could get Rome Roads or the Colossus. Now it's Wanderlust's turn. He will build the third mine, increases his population, and interestingly he takes the frugality in the urban growth. And I think all of his opponents have already taken a leader, meaning that his plan is probably now to aim towards Hammurabi at the next turn, valuing that more highly than, for example, now going for Shogun. I think Hammurabi and the Stonehenge is certainly a strong combination. He has to be a bit careful. Eepogi has Sun Tzu, so there could be some military pressure coming, but I think it could be a fine decision, even though spending 2 civil actions to take 2 HA yellows is never really a great thing to do, especially when you have a 4-step wonder like the Stonehenge. Kyshantry is then able to take the library, elects Moses, builds the third mine, increases his population, so just some standard stuff. There's already the first copy of Knights and the first copy of Iron coming down the road. Let's see if Eepogi, who has Sun Tzu, is willing to take the Knights for 2 civil actions here, but I guess building the mine and taking the Knights looks like the natural move here, and that's also indeed what he does. Then it's A440's turn. With that move, Eepogi also let both of the HA wonders stay on 2 civil actions, so let's see if A440 is willing to take one of those. I guess he will rather maybe just take the iron. In the last game we saw him skipping any mine upgrade technology, so maybe that's not his thing, but I think that's what I would be doing. There should be a good chance that he can still take one of those wonders, or maybe the chance that he can go for an H1 wonder directly. And indeed, he takes the iron, and maybe there's even a chance that he can build one directly at some point. Wanderlust goes for Hammurabi, elects him, builds the second lab with the urban growth. Thanks to having the urban growth, he has now also the option to build a step of the Stonehenge if he wants to, so while the last turn with taking the 2 HA yellows was not really that efficient, at least this turn he can then do some more efficient moves, and from now on he has an additional civil action with Hammurabi. Kyshantry, interestingly, is willing to take Leonardo here for 2 civil actions. An interesting pick, maybe just building the lab a step, increasing population 1 or 2 times, and depending on how many times you increase it, and maybe taking the Richland looks like a solid turn. But of course, Leonardo has some potential. There's a printing press and an alchemy coming down the row. Let's see if Kyshantry won't build a second lab, which would leave him open towards going for a printing press. And indeed, he does, so maybe he's hoping that he can get the printing press, or maybe there's a chance that he can build an alchemy directly, finishing the library at the next turn, and afterwards going for the alchemy. Eepogi seeds and the development of markets is revealed. He will increase his population. I think he took a resource from the development of markets, which I think makes sense together with the hanging gardens. He builds then a lab, builds a step, and interestingly is... so that's an interesting move. He is actually taking the cultural heritage here. It's an interesting move because there would be a copy of Richland that he could take as well, which would normally seem like the more valuable card to take, also more efficient card. I mean, the cultural heritage would allow him to actually go for knights already at the next turn, so who knows, maybe he has already drawn a medieval army tactic and just wants to make sure that he can actually already develop the knights at the next turn. And also generally, I think the cultural heritage A, maybe a slightly undervalued card, the one science can still be quite useful, but still an interesting decision, and let's see if Eepogi will indeed make use of it with going for knights already at the next turn, or if he just wants to generally have it with the additional science. Maybe also wants to let Columbus stay on 2 civil actions for 440, but I'm not sure if that would be really worth it, unless of course he has maybe drawn a strong colony in hopes of getting him at the next turn, but he might now also be discarded before his next turn. 440 interestingly goes for the Colossus here, could go for the Rome roads, but with the additional civil actions, that wonder doesn't pair as nicely with Aristotle, and with Eepogi having Sansu, there could be some military pressure. 440 generally being a player who values going for a bit of a more military heavy play, so I think Colossus, let's see how it will turn out for him. He will then just increase his population 2 times at the next turn. He can then build an iron mine directly if he wants to. Wanderlust will just finish the Stonehenge, takes the engineering genius in the Richland, so again just a relatively efficient turn. Kyshantry finishes the library, takes the alchemy, could have gone for the printing press, but I think there's also not the biggest synergy. No Hollywood, no Fleming, no Shakespeare, no Gaudi, so probably better to go for the more economy-focused play here, and at the next turn he actually has enough resources to build an alchemy directly and will then have a lot of science production to work with. Now it's Eepogi's turn. He seeds, opens the development of settlement. He reveals the phalanx tactic, so indeed he has a tactic with the knights, but not one that he can fulfill already this turn. He will... oh, or does he? No, he is missing the military actions, but he actually does have enough food and resources to build 2 more units. A warrior and a knight with Barbarossa, but he's lacking the military actions for that. Nonetheless, he will go for Barbarossa, plays the cultural heritage, and will start investing into knights. And yeah, I mean, Hanging Gardens, Barbarossa is a strong combination. He can really go for some early military pressure here, and who knows, if he has also drawn 1 or 2 aggressions, there might be really some potential here, or if he maybe has already seeded some strength events. Even though for now it will still take a while until the event deck will flip. He is then taking the reserves, giving him even more food, so that maybe there's a chance to get even more population out with Barbarossa. I think that definitely has some potential that Eepogi is setting up here. 440 will then go for 2 iron upgrades and just takes Nostradamus. I think that looks like a logical pick. He starts his economy upgrades and makes sure that he has some help for the defense with just taking Nostradamus, and with that maybe also making sure, or taking Nostradamus, he maybe allows him to just go for those iron upgrades, or he of course build an iron also directly without being worried. Wanderlust seeds, the development of trade routes is opened, and he's actually willing to take the second copy of Knights for 3, wants to be able to go for that upgraded tactic from Eepogi. If he starts investing into some units now, maybe he will be able to copy it in time. He builds a knight, he takes the patriotism, and so at the next turn he can actually build a warrior, and thanks to the additional military action from the patriotism, copy the upgraded tactic, and with that he should be relatively safe from any aggression. So let's see if Kyshantry also has a plan of getting stronger. He goes for Leonardo. I mean, he doesn't really have a nice way of getting stronger here available in the row. Only Swordsman and Warfare would help him with that. He will also take the Swordsman, but maybe he could get a bit in trouble. I guess if he's just building some Swordsman at the next turn, he could be somewhat fine. But he has 5 science production going now, which is quite strong. Eepogi seeds, the development of religion is revealed, which he will take. He's then using Barbarossa again to build a knight. I guess he will be using him again also on a warrior to fulfill the tactic. Is now already at 10 strength. Takes the iron for 2. Sometimes in a military heavy situation it can be fine to just ignore iron and stuff and just focus on the military, but I guess he has now a bit of a strength lead and maybe can just now focus on getting some iron upgraded. I also very much suspect that he will take the breakthrough and who knows, maybe the irrigation to further get more units going with Barbarossa. No, he is not taking the irrigation, instead just plays the reserves for resources and has then maybe the idea of going for 2 iron upgrades at the next turn, or could also just finish Hanging Gardens if he wants to. Then it's A440's turn. He will take the irrigation, scoring another science with Aristotle, also takes the alchemy, takes the warfare. After having scored another 3 science with Aristotle, he will then elect Nostradamus, increases his population, and thanks to having revealed the legion tactic at the turn before, he has now enough military actions to fulfill it, and with that is safe from an aggression. Wanderlust can also take the free religion, increases his population, and he's actually going for Jan Žižka here. That of course will give him a lot of potential, potentially making it possible to set up 2 upgraded phalanx tactics, so it might be worth it. He has already taken the knights for 3, now he's taking Žižka for 3, and here we can see that Hammurabi of course has some weaknesses in a military heavy game, but without Hammurabi, taking both knights and Žižka for 3 also would have been extremely costly and maybe not really possible. So the additional civil action from Hammurabi at times can actually also help you defending against a military push. And yeah, he will build another knight, and I guess can copy the phalanx tactic. Now is in 9 strength, and at the next turn if he just builds another warrior or another farm, even with the Ridgeland maybe, he might take the strength lead actually. Kyshantry seeds and the development of politics is revealed, especially for Eepogi. The 3 additional draws could be very important because he had only 1 card left in hand after his last turn. And Kyshantry this turn will go for building 1 swordsman, but with that is only at 5 strength, now at 6. He has just drawn some additional cards with the development of politics, but he would need 2 defense cards to defend against an aggression from Eepogi. So let's see if Eepogi will be trying an aggression, if he has one of course. He doesn't, or maybe doesn't want to try. Instead he seeds, and the development of civil life is opened, which he uses to develop the iron, will go for 2 upgrades. Oh, and interestingly takes the masonry here. I mean, the masonry, certainly a technology that can generate a lot of value. You can use it nicely in the Hanging Gardens, using it on the HA Wonder with not having upgraded or built any urban buildings yet. Can be quite strong. Maybe he hopes of getting the Great Wall also, but there's also Silk Road, there are some strong H2 wonders. I do think, especially with playing a low science game, but with some iron production, having the masonry and just trying to build a lot of wonders can potentially be interesting. Still interesting that he's willing to take it for 2. Could have also just gone for something like Ridgeland. I guess the Silk Road will be discarded. I didn't see that, but could have gone for Ridgeland. I guess then it could be a bit tricky to spend the last civil action. Frugality not really that nice with Barbarossa. Maybe the alchemy, I guess, but yeah, let's see what he will do with the masonry. It's an interesting pick, but I can see where his reasoning, or what the reasoning behind this move might be. A440 offers the open borders agreement to Kyshantry. He has now a 3rd military action, Kyshantry as well. Kyshantry might get another one soon, though, with the monarchy. Then A440 goes for 2 alchemy upgrades, has now some very solid science production, takes the Ridgeland, and then develops the irrigation. Wanderlust takes the iron and might just go for 2 upgrades. Has now just enough resource left to build a warrior, which I assume he might do. He is indeed doing that, is now taking the strength lead and might have the chance to even pull an aggression off. Kyshantry will go for the monarchy. It takes the Great Wall. I think that might play a big part in him being able to defend with not having the upgraded tactic. And then he takes the theology, builds an additional swordsman. I mean, it might take a bit of time until he will be able to finish the Great Wall. With being at 10 strength, he might now be safe from an aggression. Eepogi will develop the masonry with the breakthrough, finishes the Hanging Gardens, uses Barbarossa 1 time to go for another warrior. Now, however, he's missing just one tiny foot to go for another warrior and fulfill a 2nd tactic. So let's see if he I guess he can now take the reserves and then at the next turn play it for food and go for the second tactic if he wants to. So he takes the Code of Laws and indeed takes the reserves here. Code of Laws is somewhat interesting. Being dead low in science, maybe it could be fine to just skip it. Maybe with going for more military heavy play, even the warfare could be interesting. On the other hand, if his plan is to maybe build up a bit of economy with going for a bunch of wonders with the masonry, then having at least 5 and not only 4 civil actions could make a big difference in how easy it is for him to take those wonders. A440 finishes the Colossus before he will lose it to the end of the age. Upgrades his farm with rich land. For now, he is maybe somewhat... I mean, he would be somewhat vulnerable with just having those warriors, but he has the Colossus, the Warfare, and Nostradamus, and with that is somewhat fine, at least for now. Wanderlust will see, it doesn't go for an aggression. The scientific breakthrough is revealed, which gives actually kyshantry and A440 the most science. Wanderlust also got a bit of additional science, will invest it into the Code of Laws to not be stuck on 4 civil actions, and then he's actually willing to go for the Machu Picchu. I don't think there's a copy of... there is actually a copy of Irrigation left, so he might take that, or might have a chance to get that at the next turn, and might just want to go for the Machu Picchu here in order to set up some even stronger resource production. With Jan Žižka, he also has some solid culture production going right now. Kyshantry will go for the warfare, doesn't feel safe enough with the ability of maybe being able to finish the Great Wall soon, builds 2 steps and then takes the Urban Growth, which might allow him to go for an upgrade to Theology for free. Now their Age 2 starts, A440 gets some Colossus draws, Eepogi upgrades his last mine, goes for the Code of Laws, and I guess he might play the reserves for food. Goes for another tactic, is now at 16 strength, which is quite threatening, and I would not be surprised actually. I guess he could go for the St. Peter's Basilica, just start building some wonders, which could be fine. However, it could also be good maybe to leave himself open for some strong Age 2 wonders, and with that, maybe it could even be interesting to take something like Monarchy and Cultural Heritage here. Monarchy, it's of course late, but doing a revolution might just set him up with a government form, and after that he can start building some Age 2 wonders ideally, so I think that could be interesting. He however goes for the St. Peter's Basilica here, which of course also has some potential, and now he knows for certain that he will have a wonder to invest on. Nonetheless, also for an additional military actions to get some Age 2 draws quicker, to maybe make use out of the strength push that he is going for at the moment. I do think Monarchy plus Cultural Heritage and then leaving yourself open for those wonders. Maybe I would have preferred it, but of course it depends on when those wonders will be available and how nicely a revolution would even be possible. A440 increases his population, goes for a farm upgrade, a mine upgrade, takes the breakthrough, has now his things upgraded, but it's only an H1 economy, which can at times be a bit weak. However, there are some strong H2 wonders, and I think one way how such an H1 focused economy can work is if you implement or if you get some strong H2 wonders in addition to that. Wanderlust seeds and opens the wealthy territory. Eepogi is actually able to win it, since one warrior away has drawn an H2 defense card already. Drops quite a bit in strength now, but maybe he can destroy something to rebuild. Maybe the religion even after finishing St. Peter's. Let's see if he plans on rebuilding this warrior. Wanderlust will finish the Machu Picchu. Now no one took the irrigation away, so I guess he will take that card now. Also goes for one more iron upgrade, is not willing to take any drama or swordsman. Kyshantry goes for the architecture, and maybe the plan is to develop also the theology now, and then thanks to having developed 2 technology, he has just enough resources to actually finish the Great Wall here with Leonardo, and I assume that this is his plan, and he will do that indeed, goes up to 15 strength and takes even the strength lead for now. So the Great Wall doing some really strong work here. Now it's Eepogi's turn. He will just finish the St. Peter's Basilica. I'm very interested to see whether he is willing to destroy something to get that warrior rebuild, and indeed he destroys the religion. Doesn't need the happy faces right now with having those 2 wonders, and goes back up to 16 strength, also making sure to secure himself that copy of Rifleman. A440 is actually going for the Theocracy here, maybe just wants to grab every bit of strength that he can be getting. Takes the Knights, and with developing it, he might be able to build a Knight now and copy the upgraded Phalanx tactic. So really a strength push going on here. Some really high strength numbers, considering that we are still very much at the beginning of H2. He isn't taking the breakthrough though, which is a bit of a cost, also not taking the cannons, but seems to be prepared now again for events, and he had Nostradamus now for a while, so he might at least have knowledge about some of the events in the current deck. There's also a copy of Strategy and Napoleon and Nobel coming down the row, so there are some things that could spice the military setup that this game has up even more. So let's see which players will get those cards. Wanderlust is willing to go for the strategy here, develops it, goes up to 17 strength, takes the strength lead again. Kyshantry is offering a trade routes agreement to A440, which he can actually use food as resources. A440 can use resources as food. It's an interesting pact because Kyshantry at the moment doesn't have any additional food production. Let's see if he will get some food production or maybe food from something like Good Harvest soon. Otherwise, that seems like a little bit of a weird pact. Let's see how it looks for A440. I mean, he has some resources, so it might help him get some more population out. Yeah, it will be interesting to see if Kyshantry finds a way of making use of that pact. The thing is, of course, he's on Bronze Mine, so if he has a plan or knows something that he might have a chance of getting some food soon, then being able to turn it into resources with being that low in resource production could of course be quite strong, maybe worth the gamble of offering this pact already. Kyshantry is then going for the Justice system, after getting the resource from Leonardo is then going for Nobel, takes the cannons and the cavalryman. Eepogi goes for Catherine, doesn't go for Napoleon here for the additional strength, rather I guess maybe he would have preferred Napoleon actually. At least I would very much imagine that, but the Ocean Liner service doesn't allow taking both Napoleon and the Ocean Liner, and I think in his position, with the Masonry, with his low science, he really needs the Ocean Liner. And then he can't go for Napoleon, but he might still want to have a replacement for Barbarossa quickly, and then Catherine is, I guess, the logical choice. But I think he would have taken Napoleon if Napoleon would have been on 1. But at least he has now 5 culture production with Catherine, but is now a bit behind in strength. There is now an international trade agreement happening between A440 and Kyshantry. Kyshantry getting additional resource production, while A440 gets some additional food production. A440 goes for Napoleon, takes the strength lead for now. The strength numbers are going higher up, even higher, and then he will disband a warrior, still keeps the upgraded phalanx tactic for now at least. Now he will reveal the mobile artillery tactic, builds that cannon, and now he has the strength lead again. Wanderlust seats and the Dark Ages are opened, but actually all players nicely prepared for them, and no one loses more than 1 science. Wanderlust then takes the Eiffel Tower, goes for the irrigation, starts some food production, which is just enough to allow him increasing his population at the next turn. The Eiffel Tower might just be needed to invest his resources into something, and the Happy Face actually will also be quite useful. Kyshantry seats, the uncertain borders are revealed. Here we can see that probably Eepogi would have liked it to have Napoleon. Now he's actually losing a yellow token to him. Kyshantry will go for the selective breeding, get some food production going, meaning that from the next turn on he might indeed have the ability to use the Trade Routes Agreement Pact. He then also goes for an upgrade to Alchemy, goes for an upgrade to Theology, and ends his turn. Eepogi seats and opens the immigration, which gives him an additional population. Together with finishing the Ocean Liner, he will now have a nice and healthy amount of population to work with. Will need to fix his famine issues soon though. Finishes the Ocean Liner, increases his population with the Ocean Liner, takes the scientific method, which I guess makes a lot of sense. The patriotism and the efficient upgrade is willing, or I guess he might build an idea. Just thought he might be willing to stay the weakest, but he goes for 2 knights, interestingly. Which could be an indicator that he has an H2 tactic, because if he wants to just go for more upgraded phalanx tactics, then maybe it could be better to build a warrior on a knight, or at least not commit to a second knight. Maybe he's also hoping to get cannons and copy the mobile artillery tactic. Doesn't take the selective breeding to fix famine, but maybe he can also just build a third farm at the next turn. A440 seeds opens the Reign of Terror. Now Kyshantry is the weakest player. A440 is increasing his population thanks to the trade route agreement. He can increase his population a second time, takes the breakthrough and the efficient upgrade. And he is able, I guess he can disband his warriors, so he's going for another army. He's now at 31 strength, so once again he managed to take the strength lead. Has done quite a bit for that warfare, theocracy, colossus, and had the chance to get a strong tactic draw, and Eepogi not having enough civil actions to take Napoleon, now leaving A440 in quite a strong military position. Wanderlust opens the knowledge of the ancients, which actually gives a lot of stuff. Many players have gone for some wonders here. Wanderlust then increases his population, upgrades the farm, and interestingly is willing to take the cannons here for 3, but it's the last copy, and now he maybe can go for upgrading the mobile artillery, or not to copying the mobile artillery tactic. Delays the Eiffel Tower, has corruption, so he is facing the issue here that you often have with Machu Picchu with playing that low science production, that you have some issues investing all of those resources and food that you are producing. He's already going for another knight this turn, making that he is not the weakest, maybe increasing his chances to defend against an aggression from A440. Kyshantry offers the promise of military protection to A440, getting some additional strength at the cost of some culture production. Of course, if A440 decides to attack Kyshantry, then this pact will be cancelled, so I think for A440 it makes a lot of sense to accept this pact. For Kyshantry, I guess none of his other opponents would have given him that strength, so here he can at least hope to maybe avoid some events, but if A440 goes for war or an aggression, this pact isn't really of any help for him, and it also costs him some culture. Also, it will actually cancel the trade routes agreement, so he has now some food, but that pact will now be cancelled before he can transform any food into resources. However, he got a bit of help maybe from the military deck, because he has the defensive army available and is actually willing to destroy a mine here. Builds a cannon, goes for the frugality and the engineering genius, so is now 29 strength and relatively safe. Then Eepogi offers the scientific cooperation to Wanderlust, which Wanderlust rejects. Yeah, I guess he is not the most science saved up, weak production and only one tech in hand, while Eepogi can maybe go for rifleman, scientific methods, potentially selective breeding very quickly. I guess it might just give Eepogi too much value here. Eepogi goes for the selective breeding, goes for an upgrade, increases his population with the ocean liner, destroys a farm. Let's see if he will now just build 2 warriors. And going back to the phalanx tactic, he indeed will do that, going up to 26 strength, meaning for the moment Wanderlust is the player who is a bit in danger, but he also might get a strength boost when he goes for the cannons and the mobile artillery tactic soon, but for now he might be vulnerable from the aggression of A440. Ooh, and that's a consequence, an aggression that has some consequences, I think, here. First of all, of course, additional science is helpful for A440, but he has some breakthroughs, has some science saved up. It helps him, but it doesn't change a lot for him, at least in the immediately. For Wanderlust, however, losing 5 science here, not being able to go for cannons, that's a very big setback, because now, especially when he will lose Jan Žižka, he might be in a position where he is very much in danger of the military. I think any other aggression, of course, would be bad, but losing the ability to go for cannons in a mobile artillery tactic might now just result in getting hit by even more aggressions, so no, that is of course unfortunate for him. A440 goes for the team sports, then takes the navigation in hand. He is still in 4 civil actions, which could prove to be a problem at some point. Wanderlust will just finish the Eiffel Tower, builds an additional farm actually, and gets out of corruption like that, and then takes the architecture, doesn't take any card from the row, and if the age doesn't end, then this farm will allow him to increase his population in additional time. Immediately he will also copy the mobile artillery tactic already, which helps him for now, but will be a problem for him once he loses Jan Žižka, because he still doesn't have enough science to go for the cannons. Kyshantry will go for War territory against Wanderlust. Those are now the consequences of that spy. So yeah, definitely that looks now dangerous for Wanderlust, especially Kyshantry hasn't the second tactic fulfilled yet, can now go up to 39 strength, takes the reserves, the opera and the journalism. Eepogi makes a second try of offering the scientific operation. This time he offers it to A440, and I mean A440 accepts it, and it also looks of course reasonable for him to accept. He might be a bit limited by his lower civil actions. Maybe he will actually just go for an H2 government form here. I think it could be an idea. For Eepogi it could still be good to offer this pact because it allows him to go for both rifleman and scientific method this turn, saving a lot of science immediately and afterwards at least having some increased science production thanks to the scientific method. Let's see if he will go for some upgrades already this turn. First of all, he goes for some upgrades from Warriors to Rifleman, and he builds a religion, so for now he isn't going for the scientific method. Goes for the Republic, oh he is actually, but goes for the Republic soon. Maybe could think about doing the revolution at the next turn. A440 goes for another spy against Wanderlust, back to 0 science. He really needs this revolutionary idea, but I guess he has some good hopes of getting that, but getting that also requires him a bunch of civil actions, so let's see if he is able to take that. A440 is indeed going for an H2 government form. I think being stuck on 4 civil actions too long could just be problematic. Develops the constitutional monarchy, increases his population, develops the navigation, destroys the religion, builds a cannon and a knight going up to 44 strength, still making sure to get 3 draws, and also will get the Colossus draw soon, so he's looking quite dangerous here. And we can see here Wanderlust actually resigns, so yeah, I guess that War territory getting hit by another spy. And then A440 having the Colossus draws, having that many military actions to get a lot of draws. You can of course always have some hopes. You can hope that some wars will be directed against some other opponents, but yeah, it looks like a very tough position to recover from, especially now that he will lose Jan Žižka, and he will lose Jan Žižka while being at this war territory. He will lose most of his yellow bank, doesn't have the science to go for a happiness tech, so I guess it would be a very big stretch for him to even have a chance for the 3rd place, and with that I think it's reasonable for him to resign, even though it's a bit unfortunate of course for Kyshantry, who gets now only 7 culture instead of some some yellow tokens that he probably would have preferred. H3 starts, and Kyshantry will go for a raid now against Eepogi. Eepogi not being able to defend. Guess he doesn't have the most military actions. Would have needed 2 defense cards, something that's possible, but also maybe didn't have that many draws. Oh, I didn't count them, but I think he missed out on some draws, so having 2 defense cards is definitely not a given. Losing those labs now, of course, quite a setback for him, and the resources will be useful for Kyshantry, who is playing without coal for now. Let's see if he plans still on going for that coal, or if he will do it like A440 in the last game, and he's indeed doing it like that, which I think is the right decision. Could still go for it at the next turn, but it's just too late, and maybe it's just better to invest into H3 stuff if possible. Eepogi will use the ocean liner service, increasing his population, builds an additional rifleman going up to 33 strength at least now. 1 defense card is enough to defend against Kyshantry, and he has now a lot of civil actions to work with, but also famine. A440 seeds, the border conflict is revealed. He will be rewarded by getting some additional resources, increases his population, builds a team sports, takes the urban growth, the revolutionary idea, the rich land and the frugality. So gets a bunch of yellow cards for only 1 civil action each, which is not bad. Also now of course we are at the beginning of H3, so let's take a look at the overview and let's see which player maybe has the best chances to win. Of course, it's an extremely military heavy game, and A440 at the moment still has that military lead. However, when we take a look at his yellow bank, for now he might have some troubles of getting more strength. Maybe the 46 strength will be enough to get 1 or 2 more aggressions off, but I think soon Eepogi might maybe be in a position to rebuild some military. So A440 I think might need to switch. If he gets air forces quickly, of course, it could be a different story again. Maybe it could be worthwhile to just start deleting some stuff, going for more strength. But without Air Force, he might also need to figure out some ways for him to brew some culture. One way, of course, could be Pierre. That would be a very strong leader for him. Eepogi has now a lot of civil actions, but especially that raids and of course also some other stuff hit him quite heavily. And yeah, it looks like a tough position, but at least he has quite a culture lead before A440, so if he can somewhat stabilize, it could be fine. He has the St. Peter's Basilica still, so he doesn't have a happy face solution or tech developed, but can maybe just build a religion. Let's see if he will maybe cancel the Scientific Cooperation Pact at his next turn, which is not really doing that much for the moment. And then kyshantry also has a solid amount of strength. We shouldn't forget though that if A440 at any time decides to attack kyshantry, the Promise of Military Protection Pact will be cancelled. He will be able to get the military theory this turn, also potentially the democracy. He has more culture than A440. Also not really a way to get a lot more population out. Yeah, but Eepogi I think just has some issues. So for my guesses, first of all, and it might be a bit of a stretch, but I will guess Wanderlust as the last player. Then I think Eepogi has some issues here, that being that low in science, being behind still in military, and maybe needing one more unit in the military, which could be a bit tricky to achieve when he also wants to rebuild his science, has famine. I think he will finish third, and then for A440 in kyshantry. I will now go with kyshantry, solid amount of science, more culture than A440 for now. Also with the theater set up for leaders like Chaplin or Marlene Dietrich. So that is not clear for me, but I will go with kyshantry as the win on A440 as the second place. Alright, so let's see how H3 will play out. Kyshantry immediately getting another aggression off. Yeah, I guess that makes it now quite tough for Eepogi, and also a bit unfortunate, of course, for Eepogi. One defense card would have been enough. I do think he used one H2 defense card on that Wealthy Territory 1, but still a bit unfortunate, of course, for him not being able to defend against this aggression, with only one defense card being enough to defend. And now it looks really, really tough. His next turn is really ugly, and it looks difficult to recover from. Kyshantry will go for the democracy, gets a nice culture boost. Having the ability to go into democracy was also one of the reasons why I think that his position might be preferable over A440s. It might change though if A440, as said, gets a copy of Air Forces quickly, because then kyshantry could definitely have some difficulties defending himself. And yeah, Eepogi, yeah, I think it just looks too rough at this point. Of course, he could play on a little bit, but same as for Wanderlust, it would be a big stretch for him to come back into the game, so I think it's fair for him to resign here. And with that, it's a 4-player game with 2 resignations actually. Now only A440 and kyshantry are left in the game. A440 seats, the barbarians are revealed, which will cost kyshantry a population, while there are no early copy of Air Force. And I guess it's funny. I mean, yeah, it's still the 4-player deck. I guess, was it H3 when Wanderlust resigned? I think it was still H2 actually. Or maybe it was just at the... Because I think if a player resigns, the next deck is actually switched to that player count. I'm not 100% certain of it, but we are now in a position where we have 3 copies of Air Forces for 2 players, so that's definitely something that you don't see too often. So, but no copy of Air Force in a row for now. However, there's Pierre, which also could be a way for A440 to maybe close the gap towards kyshantry. So let's see if he will go for that. For now, it looks rather like he will go for mechanized agriculture. Maybe still more is interested more into going for a bit of a military direction. Doesn't take the military theory, but has maybe enough military actions for now. And now he will gain some population, and maybe that population he will use to put into air forces, which could make it a bit tricky for kyshantry to keep up with the strength that A440 has then. But A440 needs the air forces. It's now a 2-player game, but those 2 players still had 2 pacts with each other. Kyshantry is starting with cancelling one of them. That would be cancelled anyway if A440 attacks, so I think that of course makes sense, not losing that culture any longer. Kyshantry will take the red cross. He is only operating on 1 bronze mine, so I think that it's probably the easiest one to build. Actually, he is operating on 0 bronze mines from now on. Destroys that, builds a swordsman, is at 42 strength, takes the professional sports, doesn't take Pierre, so A440 having now the chance to take Pierre. What also is in the row, though, is a copy of Air Force. A440 left himself with just 14 resources, still has Napoleon, and I guess his turn might just look like take develop Air Forces, increase population 2 times, build 2 Air Forces. I think that is what will be happening here. And yeah, that is indeed what's happening here. A440 going up to 68 strength. However, Kyshantry has an amount, or has the culture lead that he's having is maybe big enough that he can survive 1 war, especially with him having the red cross. So let's see if A440 can follow up with maybe a 2nd war. Kyshantry will play reserves for food, builds 3 steps of the red cross, make sure to get some culture from there. I guess he might just build another swordsman and be fine with it. Takes the reserves, the revolutionary idea, takes some cards to maybe make the game end quicker, and of course those yellow cards are actually also quite useful for him. A440 steals some culture, but as you can see, Kyshantry still being the lead. Now there's Gandhi coming down the row, which Kyshantry could take it his next turn, but for now A440 has another chance to declare war already. He doesn't have a war, or maybe doesn't want to use it yet. Instead goes for a raid, destroys an opera and a theology, which is certainly painful for Kyshantry. A440 then goes for another Air Force, still making sure to draw 3 cards. Builds 1 step at least of the red cross, takes the computers. I also wouldn't be surprised to maybe see him taking fundamentalism if he wants to follow up even more for the military. Could then maybe declare war and just do a revolution or something, and also it could be helpful in case Kyshantry indeed goes for Gandhi. But he doesn't have a war yet, and rather wants to also set up some peaceful options. I guess there were now some buildings destroyed, but Kyshantry is able to finish the red cross. Now there is still a culture gap for A440 to overcome, so maybe the fundamentalism could have been interesting, but maybe he is also fine now declaring a war without it. Let's see. But especially if he draws a war over culture now, then the 1 additional military action from the fundamentalism could just make a big difference in case Kyshantry goes for Gandhi. So interesting that A440 wasn't willing to take that card. Kyshantry rebuilds the theology to not have an uprising issue, finishes the red cross. He will indeed go for Gandhi, which I think makes a lot of sense. He might still be in danger of a war because 78 might be more than he can build up towards, but I guess if he actually there is really not that many left for him to destroy. He can destroy 2 farms. I guess he can increase his population. No, he actually has already produced. Let's see him. Oh. I mean, if you know that you can just get rid of Gandhi, maybe it's not really that much needed to go for the additional military action of the fundamentalism. So A440 getting rid of Gandhi. Let's see if he will follow that up with a war, or if he just is doing it for the +9 culture and to remove the leader from Kyshantry. For now he's going for computers, going for an upgrade, another upgrade, is going for Steve Jobs. As you maybe noticed, he went for developing the computers before electing Steve Jobs, maybe doing some calculations about his resources. He's increasing his population, builds a knight, takes the engineering genius, and here we can see why he didn't use the resource, because now he has 5 military actions, can declare war over culture, has 2 military actions left, and with 12 resources he has exactly enough resources to build another cannon and an air force. And with him not drawing any new cards, I think that's a very big sign that he indeed has drawn a 2nd war and that he will deploy it at the next turn against Kyshantry. So I think with that it might look tough for Kyshantry. His Gandhi got eliminated. He will actually be able to go for air forces now, which will help him a little bit. So he will maybe do a decent defense, but his impacts are also not looking that great. I guess there aren't that many impacts in there yet. The 1 impact is from A440. The age just doesn't end yet, but I don't think A440 will get any additional draws anyway. I guess maybe losing the yellow tokens could have been good. So I'm not sure if Kyshantry maybe had the option to go for a somewhat decent turn with ending the age, which would mean that A440 has to destroy something more, but maybe it's also not too bad. Oh, and A440 actually not going for war, instead seeding and hitting a nice event at terrorism. But Interesting that he went for this turn. Maybe he just wanted to threaten the war. Maybe there's politics of strength in there and he was hoping to draw it. With that event, I had one situation in a 2-player game against Mortar where I went for such a gamble, but with 3 events left, that would be a somewhat big gamble. Maybe just, maybe forcing kyshantry to some actions. Interesting choice. But I mean, A440 sees the second impact. He might be a lot better prepared for impacts than kyshantry. And if he takes the fast food chains, like, regardless of what wonder he takes, if he takes a wonder, he will be the only one finishing one. So even without a war, he might still have some chances. Decides to go for the Manhattan Project here, which is interesting. Fast food chains, probably the bigger wonder, but maybe just the 2 actions that he needs to spend to take it and the 1 additional action to finish it, maybe is just too much. Maybe also the 2 resources. We definitely did some calculations and maybe then figured that the actions and resources that he can save with going for the Manhattan Project are worth the culture that he will miss out on. The age ends now and kyshantry seats. International agreement is revealed. Kyshantry can build an opera, plays the revolutionary idea on the reserves, goes for the professional sports, builds that to at least not having to disband a lot to fix an uprising, and then he's actually, interestingly, destroying that farm. I mean, doesn't change that much for impacts anyway. Harmony gets even worse, agriculture gets even worse, but he maybe wants to build that air force, maybe speculating that that last stage 2 event could be a strength related one, maybe even knowing it, making it a bit awkward for A440 to see it. A440 will finish the Manhattan Project, so that play isn't for the impact of strength, then maybe for the impact of competition. A440 isn't seeding, instead can take some yellow cards that he actually can use immediately now, thanks to having taken them with the international agreement. Takes the revolutionary idea, goes for the democracy, goes for the civil service, scoring some culture with Steve Jobs, and the Nobel Prize, building another computer, and now with 15 culture, the Manhattan Project maybe is also not that much worse than the fast food chains would have been, even though he has actually a bunch of population, so I guess the fast food chains would be something like 23 or 24, I would guess. You can maybe count if I'm correct with my guess. And then he placed resources, and before the final impacts, he already is only 3 culture behind kyshantry. He has 1 more impact, generally is a lot better prepared for impacts, and with that, I think it looks good for him, unless he got a bit unlucky with his impact draws. Alright, so here we have the impact of strength, which already makes it that A440 will overtake kyshantry. There's the impact of architecture, and then the last impact, I guess that's the one seeded by kyshantry, and it's a good one for him. Probably one of the few good ones, but with A440 having some good ones for himself, I mean, there are a lot of impacts that are good for him at this point. He is able to win this game, but only by 5 culture, so it was quite close. He probably didn't have a second war, and but still found a way at the end to win this game. Went for a lot of aggressions over the course of the game, and generally a very military-heavy game. Wanderlust resigning, Eepogi resigning, the 2 players are resigning in a 4-player game, certainly something that you don't see very often at a high-level tournament game. But A440 now wins the second 4-player game, with that has a very strong position. And I will actually quickly check if it is possible to take a look at the standings, or if there, I guess we basically can count the standings, and also we now have to talk about how the finals will continue. But A440 being at 12 points, kyshantry at 6, Eepogi at 2, Wanderlust at 0 points. And with being at the end of that game, I guess now it is time to talk about the incident that happened. I don't know if it happened after the finish of the game, or maybe during the end while it was still ongoing, but yeah, now let's quickly talk about what happened here. Alright, first of all, there have been some mostly respectful but also very heated discussions on Discord and I will now be talking freely about all of this without any script, and it can of course happen that I maybe don't find the right words for something, or maybe don't describe something 100% accurate, so just keep that in mind, and yeah, if I maybe describe something not in the correct way, you can point it out in the comments. Alright, what happened is that after those 4-player games, Wanderlust, maybe frustrated, wrote a private message over the app to Eepogi saying that it is obvious that Kyshantry and A440 have colluded in the 4-player games, and that Eepogi should that Wanderlust and Eepogi, that they should now cooperate in the 3-player games to still have a chance in the finals. And of course, trying something like that, reaching out to someone, asking that player for cooperation and trying to get an advantage over that is, of course, definitely not correct, and a very unsportsmanlike behavior, and also an attempt to cheat because of getting some advantage in an incorrect way. And with that clearly being unsportsmanlike behavior, Eepogi reported that to Payada. But not only that, Eepogi, as he then wrote already in the time of while playing the finals, but also in the time before, has been a little bit exhausted with playing through the ages, maybe didn't feel the spark and the enjoyment as much anymore, and already didn't really feel the enjoyment with playing in the finals, and then Wanderlust reaching out to him like that was a little bit of a tipping point, and he after that decided that he doesn't want to continue playing in the finals, and also that he wants to take a break from tournament play. And yeah, first of all I want to say I want to thank Eepogi for being a very valuable and great member of our community, and I hope that he will still stick around in the Discord, maybe also here on this channel in the comments sometimes, and maybe also in some friendly games from time to time, but for now he is taking a break from a tournament play. Now, and of course, then there was some discussion on how should things continue, and what should there be for consequences for Wanderlust, and so on and so on. So there were a lot of discussions about this. Wanderlust also, not to forget about that, came on the Discord and wrote an apology, which to me seemed genuine. It's very hard, of course, to evaluate something like this, but he wrote that he deeply regrets what he did, that he did it out of that it was an impulsive thing, and that he accepts any consequence that will be decided on how he will be maybe punished. And then there was now Payada presented a ruling, or his decision on how he wants to continue with the finals, and it will be that, like, Wanderlust game, he will be basically disqualified for the finals. Eepogi, with deciding to not play on any further, will get the 3rd place, and with that also the prize for the 3rd place. And now kyshantry and A440 will play 3 2-player games. For two of them, the scoring will be that the winner gets 5 points, and the loser 2, basically making up for the lost 3-player games, and then 1 2-player game will be scored normally, and the points that the points that the players already got out of the 4-player games, those points will be kept, meaning if kyshantry, in order for kyshantry to be able to win the World Championship, I think he needs to win all 3 games, or maybe win 2 and tie in 1. So it's a tough challenge for him, meaning that it looks very good for A440 to be this year's world champion. And but kyshantry still has a chance if he manages to get some strong 2-player performances in. Of course, that's a very sad way to end this year's World Championship. Um, and before we talk about that, I'm actually not finished yet about Payada's decision on this. Wanderlust will be basically placed as fourth or disqualified from the finals. However, Payade decided that Wanderlust will not be banned from tournament play and that he will be able to play in the World Championship 2026. A decision that again sparked some discussion with some players not being happy about his attempt of cheating and his attempt of colluding or cooperating with Eepogi in an unfair way. That this isn't punished that much because he now had 0 points after the two four-player games, so he might have finished fourth anyway. Of course, he could have still had some chances, but some players would have, or a lot of players wrote that they would be more happy if maybe there would be some more punishments, so that it's not a sign for other players who maybe want to attempt something like this that they can get away with no punishment. On the other hand, in the Chinese community, Wanderlust is a respected member. He has written an apology that, as I said, to me seemed somewhat genuine, and with that, Payada decided to not to let him play in the World Championship 2026. However, he also wrote in the Discord that he's listening to the arguments, so I'm not sure if maybe there will be a change in the decision. Whatever the decision will be, I will definitely support Payada in his decision. In my personal opinion, I think there needs to be maybe some more punishment, but no, Payada is doing a lot for those tournaments, so I will support him in what he decides. Of course, an unfortunate way to end those finals. I mean, they are not ended yet, but I mean, those have been some interesting four-player games, some military-heavy ones, and yeah, I mean, to Wanderlust's suspicion that Kyshantry and A440 have colluded in an unfair way, I definitely don't think that they have, because I know them as some respected members of the community, and I don't think those two four-player games give enough evidence. In 2 games, so much can happen. I mean, I've played so many seasons of Through the Ages in different tournaments, and it just happens from times to times that there are 2 or 3 games where maybe there will be a lot of pacts, like it were in those 2 four-player games between the players, and it just happens by chance from time to time. So 2 4-player games are definitely a way too low sample size to really be able to conclude something like this. And as I said, I don't think at all that they have colluded. I can to some extent understand that Wanderlust, maybe with being frustrated, I mean, you have seen how this game went, the spy, him not being able to go for the cannons, getting hit by all of this, and then seeing that there are many pacts. Then there was also this weird trade routes agreement pact that Kyshantry offered with having 0 food production. I can, to some extent, understand that in his frustration he might have concluded something like this. But of course that doesn't justify at all that he then tried to go for some cooperation of his own. Yeah, so that is that. I also don't really want to talk about it any longer. I think we can of course discuss those things, but I just think maybe those the discussions is maybe better with some written messages instead of me talking now freely about this. And but that's just that you know what happened. And I think we will of course take a look at the 2-player games from Kyshantry against A440 to see how the finals will conclude, and now you know why the finals will continue like that and what has happened. I hope I haven't forgotten anything important. Of course, you can Add your opinions in the comments on all of this. Please stay respectful. And yeah, with that, we are at the end of this video. And yeah, let's see if the next video will be maybe already one of the 2-player games, or if I will show one of my games finally again, which I'm also already. I mean, it is nice doing that coverage of games where I'm not involved. It also brings me some enjoyment, but now maybe taking a look at a game from my own again and seeing what decisions I did and where I can maybe improve, I'm also looking forward to. Alright, with that, I say thanks for watching, stay respectful in the comments, and then have a nice time, and see you in the next video.